This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and lots of different guests. And today I'm joined by Josie Lewis, our head gardener. That's because we thought, because we're coming to the end of the year, it would be really nice to have a catch-up about the things that we have found completely invaluable as bits of kit or tools that we have used more than anything else through the 12 months, or actually the 11 months, because we're in November. And I'm going to cover things for the sort of cut flower garden and floristry, and Josie's going to cover the things for the general garden, because that's really how we divide our labours here pretty much, is that I tend to look after and pick from the cut flower section, and Josie manages the rest of it. Good morning, Josie.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So I will kick off, and we're going to go alternate. I'm actually going to kick off with a couple of things, but we'll do one at a time. And they are copies of very treasured things that I've had for perhaps 10, 20, even 30 years in the case of this one, which is a metal trug. And we all know how invaluable those flat sort of Sussex trugs are that are often made from chestnut, which I completely adore very much from our part of the world. They're wonderful because they're so versatile. That flat profile is so versatile. You can harvest vegetables and salads into them, or you can harvest flowers and lay them out, particularly in the cooler months when you're not meant to be cutting into water, which of course I always recommend when it gets hot, so they don't flop. But anyway, back to the trug. Now, Adam was partly brought up by the most wonderful, wonderful woman called Shirley Punnett. And he spent a lot of his childhood with Shirley. And really sadly, when she died, one of the things that she had said to me before is that she knew I would love her metal trug. And it's kind of about 2 foot long and about 1 foot wide, and it has a handle. And I completely and utterly adore it. It sits by our back door and is full of all my garden tools. And I keep it here because I'm hopeless at losing things. So at least if I know that all my key tools are there, then I can just nip out into the garden and have it ready. Anyway, I got it copied. And we now sell Shirley's metal trug. And it's also absolutely marvellous, will last a lifetime, as it has Shirley's lasted her a lifetime and is now moving on to last me a lifetime. So anyway, really, really fantastic, very basic, very simple bit of gardening and floristry kit that I couldn't more passionately recommend. Put it over your arm, out you go with your scissors, which I'll come on to as one of my next bits of kit. But yeah, I'm very, very fond of it. And I'm so proud of us having copied it, and because I think it's just the most lovely thing to have. Josie, what's your number one?
So a tool that I use quite a lot in the garden here is the Hori.
Yes.
Hugely gaining in popularity now. When it first came out, I thought it was a slightly sinister tool, being like a large blade, really. We use it for all sorts of things, for cutting, great for digging out weeds, like dandelions with the taproot. Great for that. And for planting, especially if you're planting plugs and you need a smaller hole, because it's so sharp, it'll just, dig out a nice small hole. So great for planting. It's used for all sorts of things around the garden. The gardeners all have them here. We all love them. We all lose them. One of the things one of the gardeners did is to brightly paint the handle so that helps you locate them when you've left them in the border. Yeah, and
good idea.
Yeah, and the belt is also useful if you want it around you all the time. A lot of the gardeners wear tool belts. I tend to have all my tools in a bag with me. So, yeah, the Hori is one that's with us all.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so my next one is actually something else that we've copied and got manufactured, molded on something that I bought 15 years ago or so. And it's a Hungarian goulash pot. Now, that sounds really odd. That sounds like it's for the kitchen, but it isn't. We have them all around the garden here. They're really thick enamel and quite heavy. And they are literally, I think, for cooking. For a great Hungarian wedding, you cook your stew or your soup or your goulash on an open fire in the garden. And Bea Andrews was Bea Burt, used to be our head gardener here. And she had her wedding here maybe almost 20 years ago, I'd say now. And I really remember her family arriving, and they had one of these amazing pots. And they all stood around and cooked and stirred this incredible thing on an open fire in the garden. And so when I saw this in a sort of bric-a-brac reclamation yard type place, and there was actually a set of 6, I bought the lot because they were relatively cheap and lovely. And then we do really adore them here, and we've put holes in the bottom, but they are quite heavy. So we've actually got them copied now in metal, and they've got similar handles, similar black rim, and they're in a matching to the Hungarian goulash pot, very nice, rich, dark, almost sort of fir tree green. And we just find them fantastic as an alternative to terracotta here, because of course they're unbreakable, and we do tend to break quite a few terracotta pots here, but Josie's coming on to terracotta, I think, which we adore because it's such a recessive, quiet thing to have as a container in a garden. But anyway, I really adore the green enamel pots. And do you know what? The reason I want to mention it in the floristry section, so my part rather than Josie's, is that I love them in the garden as containers, and we now have different sizes. But also, I found at the weekend, I had a massive photo shoot with Jonathan Buckley, the photographer. And do you know, I really rather dislike those plastic tub trugs that we all bought about 20 years ago that, you know, you get in stable pony suppliers and agricultural farm shops and stuff. And they're really functional, but do you know what? They're not particularly lovely to look at in the garden. And so there I was picking lots of stuff and stripping all the leaves. And I actually found I just grabbed a couple of the green tub planters, and I was just stripping them into that. And then I could just take them straight down to the compost heap and empty it onto it. And the whole experience was much more aesthetic somehow, and so pleasurable than with a plastic tub trug. So for me, the green tub planter is my number 2, and it's a copy of a traditional Hungarian goulash pot.
Yeah, I do love those. Love planting those up. They're a good depth, aren't they?
They really are.
So my next one is Hortiwool. Yes. Which is a fabulous thing. I suppose we could compare it to the packing you get round, like when you have frozen food deliveries from certain companies, you get this thick wool, and that's what Hortiwool is like. I use it for so many things. And in the summer, the prime use is in hanging baskets. So it makes a lovely liner. You can get those sort of compressed paper liners, but they're so stiff and they never look really nice, but this Hortiwool looks lovely in that. And when we disassemble the baskets, if we're not planting them up with bulbs in the autumn, I'll take that wool and use it in the base of big pots that we are planting up. So if you're planting up a big terracotta, or as you've just described, one of the green metals, you put your crocks in and then put offcuts of this wool over the top, so it stops all the compost blocking up the holes when it trickles between the crocks. So
brilliant.
Yeah, don't waste any of it. And the other thing is, if you have got metal containers that you're planting up and they're going to be facing the sun all summer, then line the south side of them with the Hortiwool. It just dissipates the heat a bit, because the roots against a metal sidewall can get really hot. Yeah, and you can use it as well for protecting against slugs. So we surrounded our strawberry plants with it this year, and they did pretty well, didn't they? We got quite a few strawberries from them. And you know, if you're going a bit off piste with it, we use them as kneelers as well. So stick them inside a plastic bag and use it as a kneeler.
Brilliant. I mean, I know some people have said to me with Hortiwool that their dogs, they put it on the garden as a march against slugs, and then their dogs go and disrupt it. So maybe it depends on not having some mischievous dogs. I mean, I don't think our dogs did that with our strawberry ones, but anyway.
Well, perhaps they didn't find it, but no, they didn't.
They're very well behaved,
they are,
aren't they?
That's why.
Okay, excellent. So my next one would have to be a pair of Snips. So I know people who aren't keen on kit. I mean, I have a mother was always very anti-kit and just like, use what you've got, don't get something new. And I really know and agree with that mentality in many ways. But the thing about florist snips, as opposed to scissors, is that they just have a much stronger union, a join between the two blades. And so if I'm in a rush and I haven't got my snips in my Shirley Trug, I just go to the kitchen drawer and get out kitchen scissors. But almost always I seem to break them because I'll then get carried away and I'll go and pick something slightly woody or something more robust. And it just breaks that union. So I really, really recommend that if you like just daily pottering and picking the odd thing in your garden, a pair of snips is something to be highly recommended. They are much lighter and less cumbersome than secateurs. And that's the key thing. So they're more robust and more functional than kitchen scissors, but less heavyweight, both in your hand, but also in your tool bag or on your belt or whatever, than Velcros or whatever, your secateurs. And yet they really do the job just as well, as long as it isn't a massive, oak branch or something, then you might need a saw. But I find I use my snips literally many, many, many times a day. And there are so many different makes. I mean, I happen to have some that I've had for years, which I've put a ribbon on so no one nicks them because everybody knows they're mine, which are orange handled. But I don't think it matters. But I do think having a pair of florist snips, as well as secateurs if you're a gardener, is an incredibly worthwhile. And I would be really sad if I lost mine.
Yes, always in constant use. Mine more for deadheading than floristry.
True.
So my next one is a Poacher Spade. Yeah, the Poacher Spade, it's slightly different shape. So a normal garden spade has got quite a flat face to it, whereas a Poacher Spade is much more rounded, and it's great. sounds ridiculous. Great for digging holes.
Yes.
So coming into autumn, we plant a lot of bare roots and shrubs and all sorts going on now. And that'll be my constant companion now. It's a good sharp spade. It's a nice length handle to it, and I just find the shape of the spade itself is so easy to work with. Don't know why.
Why has it got that name?
Well, I assume when the poachers used to dig up, worms or whatever, it was easy to dig through the tunnels. Yeah. I don't know why, really. Yeah, because
I know.
Actual Poacher Spade it's even more narrow again. So I assume it was for making smaller holes.
Okay. No, I know that Hori and the Poacher Spade is something that you all tend to argue about.
Yes.
Who gets the tool first. I think that they are brilliant. But I'm very lucky that Josie does most of the planting, so I don't use the Poacher Spade so much.
But you would like it, I'm sure.
I would. And when I do more gardening again, rather than wafting around picking flowers, then I'll be back to my Poacher Spade and my Hori knife. So my next one, which I have gone on about quite a bit, but I couldn't go to a desert island, which is basically what this episode is our desert island tools, without taking a couple of vases with me. I mean, I suppose I could somehow dig out a log and try and make it sure that it held water and put my flowers in that. But if I was allowed to take a couple of vases, they would be my next two for sure. And I had to be really picky in which two I would take. And the first, without doubt, is the one that I have banged on about a lot, which is what we call our Nero vase. And I'm not exaggerating in saying that I was a contract florist 37, 8 years ago. And I first discovered this vase, and I have used it ever since. I'm afraid I have broken one or two, but I've managed to find them again. Now, the key thing about this vase is it's like a goblet. So it's got a base. It's made in clear glass. It's got a base. And then it has a hollow section next in the sort of throat of the vase. And then it comes up and goes outwards into quite a nice fat sort of bubble shape. And then critically, so it has a nice belly, and then critically it flares at the top. So coming from the top down, there's a flare, then a neck, then a belly, then it goes into a neck again, which is hollow, and then the base, the stand. Now, all those factors are really important for why it's such a good vase. Starting at the top, the flared neck means that you can add stems and they can come out almost horizontal and literally parallel to the table. And so it makes it really natural, whereas a cylinder holds the stems very vertical and it looks quite unnatural. So you want it to look like an armful of the garden, in my view. So the flared neck is incredibly useful. And then, equally importantly, it has the belly. And that means you can tuck a stem that is almost horizontal out over the flared neck, and the stem just tucks into the top, a curve of the belly, and that holds it. So again, it makes you able to create arrangements in the round, right the way round into a sort of lovely, great globe of flowers. And the final thing is you start your arrangement, your first 3 or 4 or 5 stems go into that hollow base that's almost like the hole in the polo. And you add your first 3 to 5 stems into that, and that becomes a natural like pinholder or natural oasis, because you cross those into that hollow. That then creates a framework into which you can drop everything else apart from these few horizontal stems that go literally tucking into the top curve of the belly. So if you see what I mean, and I hope that that is clear, but that is the key shape of any vase. So it doesn't have to be a narrow vase like ours in clear glass, but that's what I think you're looking for in any vase that's anything other than tiny. The bigger you go, the more important those characters are. So number 1, flared top. Number 2, has a nice, big, generous belly. And number 3, a hole in the polo in the base. And those 3 things mean you don't need oasis and you don't need a pin holder. And that is fantastic because it's more sustainable.
Yeah, it's never one on the shelves, is there, in the flower room when you want one, because they're always in use.
They're always in use, They are, yeah.
So what I'm going for next is something that I wouldn't be without in autumn, which is a bumper bulb planter, which is the long-handled planter. So, like a same length as a spade would be. And it's got the steel cylinder at the end. And I go for the bumper one because it's got a bigger diameter cylinder. So you can use it for bigger bulbs like alliums and lilies. Some of the tulips are really big circumference, so you need quite a big hole for those. And the narcissi sometimes multiple bulbs, aren't they? So they need a bigger hole as well. So that is great for planting bulbs. And yeah, it's definitely something that we use such a lot here. If you imagine digging holes with a spade, it's not so easy. And of course, the thing that I see people doing time and time again is push the cylinder into the soil, pull the plug of soil out, put the bulbs in, put a bit of grit if you need it, put your allium in or your multiple small bulbs. And then they spend time pushing the plug out to refill the hole. But what you need to be doing is leave that hole with its bulbs in it, so it's an open hole, move on to the next one. And as you push down and make that second hole, it pushes the first plug out. So you're never struggling to get the soil out of the plant. I hope that makes sense. Makes sense in my head.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
Okay.
And they come with different diameters, don't they?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. There's a slightly narrower one which is better in a way for planting in grass.
Yeah.
It's easier. The bumper bulb planter is great for borders and looser soil. And you can use it for things like potatoes and things like that in spring. So multiple use as well. The other thing I do use it for is, again, if you've got docks growing, then put it over the top of the dock, push right down, and you can often get the whole of that dock root out in the plug.
Yes, great. Okay, well, my fifth and final is another vase, or perhaps group of vases. And we found these earlier in the spring. And do you know, my whole house is full of these right now. They're ceramic, and their basic colour is a very sort of gentle mud colour. It's a sort of soft beige. And I find it just such a useful colour. It's something that I use in my soft warm palette with dahlias like cafe au lait and slightly more orange version like Comet and stuff. But anyway, that kind of very gentle cafe au lait colour, milky coffee latte colour. And I've got one right now sitting in front of me with green stripes on the milky coffee base. I've got one with yellow stripes, and I've got one with raspberry red stripes. And I've got two different sizes. I just love them. And again, at the shoot that I was doing with Jonathan at the weekend, I went out into the garden and I picked some new zinnias that we're trialing from the amazing American organic cut flower seed supplier called Floret. And we've got these rather amazing zinnias, and they're very sort of pale and, again, rather sort of milky coffee coloured. And I just arranged the colour mix from the row into the yellow and milky coffee one. And then I also picked some blackberries with casmanthium, which is one of our favourite dry grasses, and put that in the green one. And then I've just got an arrangement of dahlias in the raspberry stripe one. And, they all look great. They work really well with one stem, and they work really well, as I've got with the zinnias, with 12 or 15 stems. And they're just elegant, not too showy, but showy enough. And I passionately recommend them. And I would love to take one of those to my desert island. So that would be my final one. And Josie, your final one?
So mine would be terracotta pots. Any size, any shape. I love them. Plants just sit so well in them. I love our scalloped edge range. Those are really nice, aren't they? And we use them such a lot. And we have really big whopper terracotta pots here, which you can put a lot of plants in. But from those right down the scale to the tiny pots where we have just a few spring bulbs in them, I think they're lovely. It's the metal pots are great as well, but with the terracotta, it's always easy to get the plant to look right in it. And if you go for sometimes pelargoniums, depending on the colour, don't look quite right in the red, very red pots. So go for a slightly more rusticy coloured terracotta. And the plants will sit nicely in them. I probably overthink terracotta, really, but I'm a bit of a terracotta nerd. So I
totally agree. And I think here, because we've got so much red brick, somehow, along with metal, they just sit and feel just completely at home, don't they? And just to age them, I remember doing a trial about 20 years ago where I mixed some cow pats from the farm with some live natural yogurt, and I sort of slurped it and painted it on, and then left them in quite a non-wet place. I mean, not undercover, but just in quite a sheltered place. And I did do a trial, and they did go a lovely kind of more gentle, more sort of immediately aged colour more quickly. So I think I would recommend that.
Yeah, some of the terracotta can look a bit harsh, can't it? When you first get it, it looks a bit shiny, but it soon dulls down and looks wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you, Josie, and thank you everyone for listening to our top picks. We'll try and do this every year, is the things that through the year we have turned to again and again and again, and that we would be lost without. So, I mean, in some ways, maybe it would be better at the start of the year, but we felt it was quite nice as a roundup of the year. So thanks for listening. and see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange with me, Sarah Raven, and Josie Lewis on our Desert Island Tools. And next week, I'm joined by a new contributor for us, and that's Dominic Rose, and he is the chairman of our company, actually. And he's a real inspiration to me because he runs this wonderful community gardening project with his children and without, in really espousing the brilliance of community gardening and biodiversity gardening in a London suburb. And so he's going to talk us through what they do as a group, what you can do in your garden to link with your neighbour, i.e. not have fences but have hedges, etc. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. See you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.